So earlier on, you guys heard me say that I would like to be up here forever, right? 30 days, whatever. Let me ask you guys a question. What do you think is more valuable to me? Being here and doing this, or the eventual result that will come, be it from the proceeds and money that comes from this, the DVD set that will inevitably come from it, that kind of thing. What do you guys think? What do you think is more enjoyable? Like, do I look like I'm having fun up here? You know what I'm saying? Right? Is the kind of fun, like especially, like look at the fun that we were having earlier here, just today, all of us together. Is the kind of fun that we were having here, what's more fun, that or like getting a bigger number when you get the bank statement comes out of your bank machine? You know what I'm saying? Right? That's what real fun is. Isn't it interesting how society has got us so fucking scattered and so fucking stuck on the surface of things that we can no longer see the depth, and we're running around trying to find new stimulation after new stimulation, more, right? Because we don't see the depth in things. Most people don't even realize that confidence and feeling good about yourself is a default state. And this was the sort of shocking epiphany that I had, was realizing that feeling good about myself was a default state. Let me tell you why. Here's the difference between ego and self-esteem, okay? If you want to just sort of break it down really simply. Self-esteem, you're born with it, just like arms and legs. It's indescribable. You cannot explain it. You cannot logicize it. It's like the word mojo, like the word soul, all right? You have it as a child, and you're born with it, okay? It is self-sustaining. It's just a self-sustaining thing that you have. What about ego? What the ego is a rational construct that we come up with as a substitute for self-esteem when self-esteem becomes wounded at a young age. All right? So things like getting status, making money, pulling girls, these things allow us to logically see what we should have as confidence. Now here's where it gets interesting. Could we not make an argument that the ego is more real than self-esteem because the ego is based off something rational? Right? You could say, why should I feel confident? If I've got my business running well, and I'm doing really great with other women, and I've got this going well and this going well, then I should be confident. If I don't have anything going for me, why would I feel confident? That's fake. On the surface, doesn't that make sense? It's rational. Right? It's rational. On the surface, it makes sense. Okay? And a lot of people, when you talk about the difference between ego and self-esteem, that's the first thing that they're going to say to you. You know? That's what it's going to be. Anyway, look. I was studying this stuff, and I remember I was doing a boot camp, and I was sort of reading him different notes that I had, and started going through the concept of ego, and I was explaining it back to him, and suddenly what happened was like in one moment, a very Hollywood-style moment, I was reading it, and I realized, like I'm reading it and explaining how we logically try to come up with reasons for why we should feel confident when it's just a default state. And I was reading about that. Kieran's article is one of them. I've been reading, other sources too, and we were going through this, and suddenly it hit me like a fucking ton of bricks, like boom, all right? And I looked at it, and I was like, like I saw it. I saw the ego, okay? I just started laughing, and I started mumbling, and I said, I think that studying. I remember I said that, I was like, I think studying this is maybe better for me than you. I think I need to really think about this stuff, right? And I was mumbling. And it was weird because I felt like my body just started to feel really good. You remember how we felt earlier when we were jumping around? I started to feel like that, right? And I had never really felt like that before. And I just started to feel really good, right? And I could see the ego. I saw what I was doing. And like all these images were going through my mind, like all my life from a young age, scrambling, like a rat in a rat race, trying to find reasons to know who I am, right? And it all went through my head, and I was like, oh my God, you've got to be kidding me. 2 decades? I did that for 2 decades? Oh my God, it hit me, all right? And it was interesting how all the stress that I was experiencing leading up to that sort of pushed me over the cliff, all right, to just sort of realizing that. And After that, I went out and sought out books on the topic. I started looking for books. Suddenly I found books like the Eckhart Tolle book, different ones like that explain this stuff and that explain that other people had similar experiences to this. And let me tell you, I walked around that night at the nightclub, and I was the most in state I'd ever been. But what I really noticed more than anything was that it wasn't like the normal state that I felt was like taking two electrical thick plugs, putting my hands on both of them and being like zzz, 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 zzz. But what I felt when I was there was like a very calm sort of state, right? Remember we talked about like the burning brush fire versus like the red hot coal? Well, this is more like the searing hot coal. It was like I just felt good. And you know how a lot of the time when you're in state you feel really good, and then maybe you see a certain approach that you don't think you should do because you might get a bad response and you'll fall out of state? You guys ever had that? You're like, huh, you're like, yeah, and then you see an approach that looks tough, you're like, I'm not going to do that one, that might be tough. Yeah, right, and you go like that. Okay? I didn't feel like that. I was completely cool. I was completely unattached to the outcome. It was like I was just chill, right? All of that inner dialogue that was in my head just turned off. All right, it was gone, and I was just kind of like, and I'm like looking around. I'm like just looking around, and I could start to see the depth in things. Right, it wasn't always just that superficial level. So I walked around like that for about 4 days. Okay, and I laughed a lot. Right, I would just like everything I saw. I was like, oh, right. I was just laughing, and this wasn't something I kept it private because it seemed so strange to me. I didn't really want to talk about it. I just felt great for about 4 days. What happened after about 4 days was I felt like I had lost myself, right? I was like, why am I not thinking anymore, right? Where did all my problems go? Why am I not thinking? And the ego kind of came in the back door. Do you want to know how the ego comes in the back door? It does this. You start to feel really great and you quote unquote find self-esteem, and then you go, look at all these other people that are so stuck in their egos. Man, these guys need to learn self-esteem like me. All right? That's how the ego creeps back in. It's the most common way that the ego will creep back in. You start going, oh, this guy's so trapped in ego. Oh my God. All right? And you can see a guy who probably had that kind of like real self-esteem epiphany at one point, and then the ego just found its way in. The ego went, what are you doing, right? Snuck in the back door. It's like, I'm back, and you don't know I'm back, right? But go ahead and keep telling people how great you are now that you found self-esteem, okay? That's what the ego likes to do. There's a certain epiphany that happens that happiness is your default state. And that's a very, very freaky epiphany. Because think of all the implications that has. If happiness is your default state, what would be the purpose of all the things you've done in your life?
There is none. You can just be happy doing nothing. And that actually goes back to what you were saying. When you said you didn't see the value in like spiritual leaders that don't do anything except for just practice spirituality or whatever. That's why. They're just happy.
They're just happy, right? And so I started to panic because it's like, well, why am I doing this then? Why am I doing that if I could just feel good independently, right? And it's sort of a freaky kind of epiphany. But nonetheless, seeing how well I did with women that weekend, I knew that I had to find a way to stabilize this, can it, and teach it. All right? Because this was the shit. Okay? Right? I was like, this is amazing. It was the first time that I'd ever had a girl say to me, take me home and fuck me. I had never had, in all my years in the game, I'd never had a girl say, take me home now and fuck me. And that happened that weekend. That was also the weekend, you remember the story I told about the girl that stormed over and shoved the other girl out of the way and tried to pull me out of the club? That also happened that weekend separately, okay? So I was getting these incredible responses, right? And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, right? And that was it. So I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is incredible, but what is this? What's going on here? And how do I articulate this to people? Anyway, look, from that point, I went through a lot of different ups and downs, okay? I really connected to my self-esteem for a while, then I really lost it, all right? Then I went back into my old habits, even like 10 times harder, and then sort of fluctuated in and out of them for another year, all right? Kind of back and forth, back and forth. Anyway, look, what is the process? What goes on here? Well, look, let's think ego. What is it? How does it form? Where does it come from? All right, so I'm sitting there with my girlfriend. We're in Sam Goody's. You guys know that store?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're sitting there listening to music. She's got the headphones on her ears, and she's listening to it, and this little black kid comes up, and he's like, boom, just kind of bopping his head, right? Walks up to her, taps her on the leg, pulls the cord, takes the headphones off of her ears, puts it on, and he starts jamming. He's like, yeah, like that. And me and my girlfriend looked at each other, and we're like, what is this? Right? Like, are you kidding? Right? And we look at the kid, we're like, what? And the kid's like that, right? And it's so cute, right? So adorable, it's so funny. And it really got me thinking that, as a kid, you had self-esteem, right? You didn't have this real concept of this grandiose image of yourself, or even as a grand victim, whatever it was. You just were aware of what was going on and you felt good, right? Do you remember a time when you could approach people without any issue? Does everyone here have a time in their life like that? Say aye. All right? Everyone had that at one point, where it's like, hey, do you want to be my friend? And it was just assumed, right? That is at one point in your life, you had that. But at some point, we become wounded. And wounding can happen for many different reasons, can't it? It can happen when someone who you trusted just totally fucking screws you over. It can happen when your parents tell you don't talk to strangers, or children are to be seen, not to be heard. It's very 1800s, but derivatives of that. And it can especially happen from social conditioning, as you continually have all of your role models, all of the people who you look up to, are showing you how great they are, right? Or maybe not all of them, but most of them. Most of your role models are showing you, this is the lifestyle, this is the way to happiness. You see some guy, he's got a certain brand of sunglasses, and he's like, right? He's got a certain drink, he's like, all right? And this advertisement, and as a kid, kids are sponges. Right? Kids are innocent. They're sponges. So they're soaking this in, right? And that's going into their head that they have to become this big grandiose character. So you get wounded, right? Something happens and it makes you feel bad. And what winds up happening is you don't feel that you can just be confident just for you anymore. You feel disconnected from the tribe, not a part of the tribe. So of course you feel disconnected. And what does your mind start to do? Your mind can't just let you sit there totally screwed up with no confidence at all, right? So your mind says, no. Let's come up with logical reasons for why we can feel good. Okay? What are all the logical reasons that I can feel good about myself? And now, here comes the comparisons. Here comes the judgments. Here comes looking at yourself compared to your fellow man and finding the differences. Because self-esteem is based about common humanity, and ego is based about separateness and differentness. So you say, look, compared to Tommy, I have this and this and this. And compared to Joey, I'm, maybe not quite as good, and here's where I stand, and that kind of thing. And the ego starts to develop. And now you can say, oh, well, look, I can approach these people and talk to them. Why? I can draw confidence from that. Why? Simple, because of all these other things. So you remember that sort of, I was joking around the other day saying how a lot of guys would be like, me, I'm batting 100, man. Right? You remember Jenny from back in the day? She wanted me. I saw her, I wanted her, I got her. Right? And that's the ego there. It's like looking for logical reasons why we can feel confident. So why is the ego false? What is false by nature about the ego? Well, let me ask you this. When you speak with most people about their lives, how accurate are their memories?
Not very.
Do you have a perfectly recorded, accurate memory of your life? Do you not think that certain things that you remember about yourself, you might have twisted them in order to make it seem more positive in your favor? Or maybe you twisted them to seem like a bigger victim so you could create an identity out of that? Everybody does it. Your ego is by nature false. It is never as accurate as you think. It's just this little fake construct that you've made. And you want to know something? When you first face the ego for what it is, it seems huge, doesn't it? The idea of transcending the ego. But the ego is really nothing more than a little grain of sand. That's about how big it is. And you know what happens when you have a little grain of sand, but it's stuck right up on your eye? How big does it look?
Huge.
Looks huge, right? Remember we talked about dilating perception? Well, when you're thinking small, and your perception is drawn in like that, and that's where the ego is, it's like having two big grains of sand on your eyes, and that's all you can see. And that is the filter through which you see the world. So what is the ego made out of? What is the structure of the ego? Here's a couple examples. Logical evidence. What is examples of logical evidence? I hooked up with this girl, I got this girl, I got this girl, I got this girl. Okay? She took it on the face because she wants me so bad. This girl let me do this to her, right? All that kind of stuff. Okay? How about people's opinions? Do you know, has everyone here at some point tried to find themselves in other people's opinions? Has everyone here done that at some point?
Yes.
Maybe. Rationalizations, like, you know, this person is such a dick, and the only reason that other people like that person is because they're stupid, or, you know, whatever it is, right? Everyone has a story connected to other stories in order to come up with their sense of self. And the last one that I think is really interesting is comparisons. Comparisons is a very interesting one because essentially what the ego is look, when I ask what you are, do you know what you are?
No.
Like, okay, where are you right now? Yeah, where are you? Very simple, real simple, where are you?
Here.
Spit it out. Just, okay, where are we?
Here.
Okay, where's here?
Hotel.
We're in a hotel. Where's the hotel?
LAX.
LAX. Where's LAX?
In LA. Inglewood, Los Angeles.
Inglewood. All right. Where's the, okay? And where's that?
California.
Earth. Where's Earth? Where's the universe? No one knows. Where do you go after you die?
No one knows.
No one knows. Are you even really alive right now?
We don't know.
Like compared to what we think life is? We don't know. Okay? Life is about the unknown. But what the ego does is it tries to shelter us from the unknown, doesn't it? It tries to say, look, I have all these labels for things, and I have all these judgments on things and comparisons from things. I know my environment. I know the truth about my environment. And so what that does is it shelters us from the real, what could be viewed as very frightening truth that our lives, we are constantly in the unknown. Okay? Life is the unknown. In a lot of ways, human life is very absurd in the sense that we're born, you know, we strive, we do amazing things, we create relationships, we have an impact, all to do what? To die. Right? Life will end. And we say, well, what's the point? And in a lot of ways, this is a point that a guy named Ernest Becker made, and I think it's absolutely fascinating, which is that the fact that on some day that we're going to die leads to a denial of death where we can begin to view the world as an arena for heroism. Has anyone here ever read the Iliad of Homer?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? You see how their view of reality is the world is an arena for heroism, so other people will speak of me after I'm dead and gone. I will be sung about after I'm dead and gone. I'll have fame on the lips of men. And so, essentially, what happens is we don't know who we are, right? We don't know who we are. We don't know what we are. We don't really know anything. So our mind says we have to make context. We have to find a context, right? If you're in an elevator that's going up and down, and it's a glass elevator, and you can see where the floor is and you can see where the ceiling is, do you know how high you are? What if you're in an elevator where it's closed in and there's no buttons on the top? Then do you know how high you are? Well, that's what the ego is trying to do. It's looking for people to compare yourself to. So the ego always wants to kick the next man down. Why? Because when you kick the next man down, you can show why you're better. That's why people will say things like, I'm the best. Have you ever found yourself saying, I want to be the best? Rather than saying, I want to meet my potential, you say, I want to be the best. What does the best imply?
Better than others.
Better than others, right? Does it imply togetherness or separation?
Separation.
Okay. So this is what the ego does. It's always looking for separation to show why you're more real, you're more tangible. Okay? That's really what's going on there. So eventually